I want to move on to a big topic. Now, this was what I like to call a audible at the line. If you're a football fan, you know that there are no better audible callers than Ben Roethlisberger was really good at it. Obviously, there were, there's a bunch of quarterbacks that are super, super good at it. And the reason I decided to pull or change one of the original conversations was a particular conversation that I had this morning with Everborn Saga. And interestingly enough, and I said this earlier, and I want to, and I said it in the green room, and I want to be clear. The smoke I had for Microsoft last week for what they did with the 9,100 layoffs and the studio closures and the game cancellations, I make no apologies for that. That's righteous smoke. They deserved it. They're a $3.7 trillion company. I understand the business side of it, but that doesn't mean I have to like seeing that many people without a job. And again, I understand this. I know it's the industry, and it's not just gaming, and it's not just Microsoft. I understand all of that, but I make no apologies for the righteous smoke that I had for them, which I still do. Though, with that said, ladies and gentlemen, when I say Xbox tax, or is the Xbox tax real, you're going to get people to roll the eyes. You're going to get people to say, oh, boom, this again. And you know what? You can turn this podcast off anytime you want. I don't encourage you to leave, but this is a conversation that needs to be had. And I am not taking this conversation outside of the current year. 2025 is a year that we've just crossed the halfway mark. We're almost halfway through July, which is incredible because I felt like July just started yesterday, and we're already by the end of weekend halfway through. It's crazy, right? That's how fast this year is going. But during this one particular 6-month block, we have had for Xbox. Now, I want to talk about positive things before we get into the negative stories, the negative conversation, right? The year starts out with a developer direct that gives us new information about Avowed and the fact that they heard the cries of the people. Originally, it was going to be 30 frames, and they gave us a 30, 40, 60, still my game of the year, 2025. Loved every second of it. I have days worth of play in it, and I actually cannot wait for them to enact the new game plus, because I'm going to play through it again in a totally different way, right? And of course, you had Avowed released, and then you had a confirmed roadmap that is, by the end of this year, Xbox Game Studios will have delivered 12 first-party games. That is just crazy, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, think about that for a second. 12 first-party games in a year. Now, granted, it's not, one per month like the year is, but it's still 12 games. And when you compare that to what the other guys are doing, the other guys don't even have a fourth of that. And that's a positive story, right? The fact that we have a Xbox handheld device coming out at the end of the year that some people refuse to acknowledge that it's an Xbox, even though it literally has an Xbox button. It literally has Xbox in the title. It literally was designed in partnership with ROG and Xbox. None of that matters. It's just a PC device. We'll get. I have a thought on that. We're getting a handheld, folks. 2 of them. Now, maybe they're not for you. One of those bad boys are for me. So you got a roadmap. You had what I thought was an incredible, not as good as last year's, showcase, but a 9 out of 10. Lots of JRPGs, lots of third-party support, some really big bangers in there, and for first party. Game Pass has not been increased. You're getting more games in Game Pass now than ever. You know, a small little nugget of excitement for Gears of War, Reloaded. If you owned it digitally or physically, you got a code for it for free. If you didn't have Xbox Game Pass, if you have Xbox Game Pass, boom, it's in there. Like there is literally at any turn a ton of incredible news on why you should be an Xbox fan, whether it be inherent value, whether it be the roadmap for the future, whether it be the games that are releasing this year, whether it be the hardware and the rumors that are coming out. And again, it's not really rumors because Sarah Bond said that they're working on consoles for next generation in plural. You know that they're doing this. There is a ton of excitement behind the brand. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? The gaming press will not let you think that. They will let you believe or lead you to believe that Xbox is a dying brand. Xbox is leaving the hardware business. Xbox is going third party. Xbox is not the same as it used to be because they don't value their diehard fans through exclusivity. I can go on for 3 hours, but I broke this down in a way where I asked for some help from Everborn, and we decided that let's just keep this to 2025, the Xbox tax, and see whether or not I'm being a weirdo or I'm actually talking real life stuff here. Well, I'm going to give you the 5 bullet points that I have: Cork, Fuzzy, and Silent, and Chat, and then you run with it. Again, this is an open-ended conversation, but these are the 5 bullet points that have happened in 2025 in just the first 6 months of the year. After all of the goodness that I just gave you about Xbox, this is the running narrative. These 5 bullet points are the running narrative today, and they continue to lead the story in game journalism, which is mind-blowing. So here you go, folks. No new Xbox hardware in 26 or 27, whenever the hardware releases. The Xbox Ally is not an Xbox device / console. It's a PC handheld. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, not profitable. We know how that went for Christopher Dring. Not really well, which is why he's a hack. Xbox is not doing backwards compatibility, confirmed by another Moore's Law or whatever his name is. And again, you know how this whole thing came about? When the Xbox Game Pass Ultimate is not profitable, didn't work. Goalposts were immediately moved, and well, I heard that the next Xbox is not going to be backwards compatible, even though the president of Xbox is leading an entirely brand new division on forward and backwards compatibility. But we're going to listen to some knucklehead who is supposedly a leaker. Okay, good for you if you believe that. And lastly, Microsoft announced layoffs, not because they wanted to go to AI, not because it was performance, because of Xbox Game Pass damaging and ruining the industry. That is, you know what's interesting? You say, did you make those up? I did not. I am not going to name the names because I don't want to smoke, but those headlines that I just read for you are literally from the pages of certain websites that this was the lead title. That's where I got this from, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? I didn't make this up. This literally was pulled from the pages of websites. So if that's not Xbox tax, Silent Cypher, and Fuzzy, and Cork, and Chat, I actually don't know what is. So I'm going to go first to Cork and Stein. Cork, it's been a while since you've been here. I've seen some of your posts. I've seen some of you've been a little pointed at times with certain journalists, and I appreciate the honesty and the candor. What are your thoughts on my 5 bullet points being these conversations were just the first 6 months of this year. And then when you just stop for a second, and this is not console warring, folks. This is just, let's compare apples to apples. If you look at what PlayStation has done in the same time frame, it is a stark difference. I would even say it is an about face compared to what Xbox has done positively versus what Sony has done negatively. But you know how many stories that you have seen negative about Sony? Very few. Hardly any pushback. Let's get your thoughts, man.
I mean, we've all known the Xbox tax has been around for a while now. People will say, no, it doesn't exist. But I mean, you just named 5 in the last 6 months, and it goes to years beyond that. Even though, I'll say it, even with like something like Redfall, there was a bit of an Xbox tax there with how people responded to the game. Yeah, it wasn't in its best shape. Yeah, it needed some help. But you had people like dogpiling like a 3 or a 2. And I was like, dude, there's no way this is a 3 game. Maybe 5, 6. It did have its issues. I'd see 5 or 6, but yeah, just things like that. It's just ridiculous. It's like, yeah, the whole Game Pass Ultimate is not profitable. Dude, you want to know what's not profitable? Sony's low margins. Like, people don't call that out. We even saw that in a leak that happened where Sony's financials were on the table. And I even called it last year too, where their operating profit was down 26%. I even said back in February 2024, Helldivers is going to come to Xbox because of this. Look where we're at now. Speaking of leaks, we're even going to talk about, some leaks next, in the next segment, but you have people that, all of a sudden, Insomniac gets a leak. Oh, we don't do leaks here. We don't do leaks here. VGC.
I know what you're talking about. That you mean they don't discuss leaks publicly?
Yeah. We don't talk about leaks here.
Yeah.
And guess what? 2 weeks later, Xbox had a massive leak, and they're talking about controllers. They're talking about consoles. Even now, look at the same people that are dropping all the Fallout leaks and stuff like that. They literally were saying they don't do leaks when it was happening to Sony, and now all of a sudden there's a Fallout leak, and they're dropping a whole bunch of info. The tax is there. The tax is real. It's been there for a while. And I don't even think some of it is because of Xbox. Essentially, I think it's just Microsoft. Some people just hate Microsoft. Like you were saying, Boom. Not that you hate it, but that, there's smoke there to be had for Microsoft.
Indeed.
They've had a lot of they've dropped the ball quite a bit, and they haven't handled things the best way. So I get why people are kind of pointed and don't want to give Xbox the shot it deserves. But it's weird because I even made a post. I was trying to see if I could find it on my timeline, so I could actually quote it. But basically, it was coming out to the point that if people spent more time highlighting the consumer-friendly stuff that Xbox does and really pushing that to be a standard in the industry, the other people on platforms would have a much better quality of life as gamers, and we should be pushing that instead of trying to make up these FUD narratives, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Stop trying to push that stuff. Start highlighting. I mean, yeah, when there's times to be had, yeah, call it out. I 100% get it. But when it's not, I mean, start highlighting some of the great stuff that Xbox does do, like Play Anywhere. Such a massive, great, like consumer friendly thing for the industry. Instead, of the opposite, where you have Sony, where it's locking down its ecosystems to where you have to buy the game 3 different times on 3 different platforms. That's not consumer friendly. What about, like you said, we got 12 games coming out for Xbox this last year, and Sony's canceling 12 games. So where's the call out for that? there's a tax there, and I get it. Sony was number one for the longest time, and nobody wants to piss off number one. They've been known to blacklist people. Same with Nintendo. I'm not saying Xbox should do the same, but I mean, there's a certain there of people that don't want to piss off Sony because they don't want to lose their access. So they kind of, they kiss the hand, they kiss the ring, and they fall in line, and it's just. I just don't get it. Why, when there's so many great things Xbox does do for consumers, and that's where people kind of lose that vision, is they try and be analysts, they try and be insiders, they try and be leakers. No, you are none of those things. You are a consumer first and foremost. You spend money with your wallet like we all do. Speak with your wallet, not with what this little fake persona or whatever vision you have of yourself. I know it's hard to relate to a consumer from like a media standpoint when you're getting the games for free, when you get these inside tracks and stuff like that, but try and put yourself, because that's who you're ultimately speaking for, is the consumer. Most of the time you're trying to inform them, you're trying to give them reviews, previews, you're trying to give them a benefit to be more knowledgeable in that stuff. And so you have to think like a consumer when you write this stuff, and they don't. And that's where I think a lot of people feel like they have to have this inside knowledge and inside track and start acting like they're not consumers. We all play the games and we all spend for it. Speak with your wallet, and that's what we need more of.
And great points all around. Again, it's when you talk about consumerism, right? I'll never advocate for price increases and paying more to get less. If you do, either you're loaded or a moron. One of the two. And usually people with money are morons. So maybe it's just one person. Sorry. But when you talk about Xbox as being, look, I understand they're a corporation and they don't give a flying F about us. We're a number, we're a dollar sign, we're literally a walking dollar sign. And I totally get that. And if you think otherwise, you're wrong, because that's all they care about, is making money for their investors. Perfect example of that is they literally laid off 9,100 people to have more money to invest in AI, to then take more jobs. That's as shitty as it gets, folks. But that doesn't mean I have to hate Xbox, because all corporations do this. And again, this is not an us versus them, a PlayStation versus Xbox thing. This is, let's just talk about the tax. And again, just hearkening quickly back to the value of why it's great to play on Xbox, is one of the things is backwards compatibility. Upgrades to graphics and sound and control on a game that might be 20 years old, that if it was Sony, they would charge you $10. If they were Nintendo, there would be no upgrade path. You'd have to buy the game again, but not for Xbox. If it's part of the backwards compatibility program, you get the updated graphics and you get the boost on everything. And what do they charge you? Literally nothing. Pop the disc in and play. Press start on your controller and play the game, and you get all these bonuses. That's just one of the things. But I want to bring this back to Silent Cypher, and I just want to reiterate my points of view, because I think that when you consider, again, like, there's going to be somebody in this chat, if they haven't already, and they're gonna be against the whole Xbox tax thing. It doesn't exist. There's just no way. And listen, I'm not here to fight with anybody. If you honestly believe in your heart of hearts that there is no push to get Xbox out the business, that is a you problem. I have listed, and this is, again, this list could be double, triple of what has gone on this year. But these are the most top conversations, and literally were pulled from articles that were written by I use the word loosely, journalists. Okay? No new Xbox hardware in 26, 27. The Xbox Ally is not an Xbox device / console. It is a PC handheld. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate is not profitable. Oh, that's pretty interesting. Considering that Satya cuts off anything that's not making money, but okay, if you believe that. Xbox is not doing backwards compatibility, confirmed. And the Microsoft announcement of the layoffs were not because they wanted to do something shitty, which they did, but it was certainly because of Xbox Game Pass and its value. Silent Cypher, these are literal headlines pulled from the papers or from the digital papers. And this is the conversation that's happening. When you go and you look at what Sony hasn't done, and I say hasn't done for their fans in 2025, it's a stark difference to what Xbox has done. So why all of the hate for Xbox and not even a question as to what's going on with Sony? Because of the Xbox tax. Get your thoughts, man.
It goes back. I remember it when I was working in the game side of things back early 2000s, working at the game store. And when Xbox came onto the scene, Sony from the beginning was very much trying to demonize the brand because it was competition. So they wanted to put it out there. They wanted to be like, oh, you don't want to support these guys. You know where their console comes from. It comes from Microsoft. Microsoft bad. That was an approach right from the beginning. I remember seeing it. I remember seeing like even in the marketing, like when Killzone and some of those started coming out, they had stuff in the marketing where it's like, oh, it's the Halo killer, blah, blah, blah. Like, and they pushed really hard on it. They had their Sony rep come out constantly being like, no, this will put that thing to bed. It was always a thing. And there was always this like rivalry, even just in the stores. They were always trying to vie for it. And you see companies do this, of course, throughout all the markets, but like they were always trying to kick them down a little bit. Like they would try and pay more so they could reduce the presence of Microsoft on the wall. Because again, it's one of those things where it's like Xbox had success with something like Halo, with something like Star Wars Jedi Knights, Jedi Academy, with something like Rainbow Six 3. Those games came out, they had an Xbox Live service, and they were doing things that Sony didn't even have unless you had the attachment for Ethernet. And they're like, no. But remember, Microsoft bad. Look at us. Look at what we have over here. And the thing is they had already planted themselves pretty heavily in the market. PS1 was huge for them. And so PS2, when it came out, it just sold out like gangbusters for quite a while. And it was your first opportunity to get a Blu-ray player, DVD player at the time, which is like, it was a whole new thing. It was a whole new thing for everyone. Like it was a super cheap way for people to get in the market. There was a lot of fan base and support there. And from the early days, I remember like Sony constantly was trying to doggy pile on them. I saw it from Nintendo occasionally, but Sony has always kind of carried that torch. And because you had a bunch of fans there, look at most of the people you see on Twitter, they go back to that time frame supporting Sony. And it's literally like they've just been sitting there carrying that torch for Sony all these years because Microsoft bad. Doesn't matter what Microsoft does. It doesn't matter if they bring out a user, like a super consumer friendly thing like Game Pass, where if you don't want to spend all your money on games, you can jump into Game Pass, you can try stuff, see if you like it. If you decide you want to buy a copy, awesome. But you're getting that game out there. You're getting it to more eyes than you did previously. But that's a bad thing. And clearly it can't make money, right? Because when you get over 30 plus million or however many users and you have them investing in the ecosystem and stuff, obviously it's a loss leader. It's clearly not making any money whatsoever, which is a ridiculous narrative. I feel like you don't have to look very far. Look at something like Call of Duty. You jump in there, you see how many microtransactions they're selling on that game. So you want to tell me that someone can get into that ecosystem for free because the game's on there for free.
Yep.
If you've got the service, and they're going to go in there and they're going to see those characters and stuff, and they're going to buy that stuff because there's a heavy impulse to just buy that stuff because you didn't pay anything at the door. And you're like, oh, well, hell, I didn't pay $60 for the game, so I'm going to buy some skins. I'm going to get something else. People do this, and they revisit that store on the regular. I'm guilty of it. I jump in there. I'm like, oh, Beavis and Butthead, Jay and Silent Bob. Yeah, that'd be pretty funny to play as those characters. I spend money in it just like millions of other people do. That on its own, that game alone is a cash cow just by the microtransactions. And you have access to it if you have Game Pass. X amount of millions of people now have access to that game for free because of the service. Multiply the money that they make off of that thing alone, and it's insane. Like, it prints money. But Game Pass is bad, and obviously it can't make money. That's the narrative we've been told. We got to believe it because it came from just the most credible sources. Folks like Drang and some of these other shills are just sitting out there just having all the fun for Sony, carrying a torch for a company that does not care about them whatsoever. But they still got to wear their team blue shirts because they feel like they're part of some sort of tribe or something. Like, I don't know what's wrong with you, your derangement syndrome, whatever's going on. Think for yourself. If you're a gamer, play the games wherever the games are. If you don't like that, then maybe you need to grow up and get over the rhetoric a little bit. And to go back to Microsoft, and you mentioned, of course, the layoffs. And it's not like you can say that Microsoft isn't at fault also. Like, every one of these companies, any given time, they will step on the rake. It's what happens, right? Like, as soon as you've got good press, you find the rake and you proceed to hit yourself constantly with it. And it's embarrassing to watch. And in a situation like this, where they got rid of as many people as they did, it's like not one person is at fault, but that whole situation, just the way it was revealed, the way it was released from top to bottom, was gross. It was super unnecessary. And then for us to see this week where they're like, oh, hey, we've got the highest, I forget what it was they announced this week, but they're like, oh, hey, we have like the highest we've ever had as far as engagement or as far as like active users. And I'm just like, oh, that's great. Cool. So you got rid of all those people, but you're going to try and parade it like you got to win. Like, that's gross. maybe don't step on the corpses right after you announce this news.
Hello. Great point of view.
and it's not just Microsoft that is, that's in the bad on that one. Like, even from the companies that were affected on this, on the on the Xbox side, you had people coming out saying like, we just met with leadership a couple weeks back, month back, whatever. And they were really excited about the progress we had made on these games. And then they got shafted like this. Like, again, from start to finish, the way it was communicated, the way it was done was gross. It's nothing less than I would expect from a giant corporation, but you would hope that they had learned a lesson over the years and maybe try and figure out a way to, I don't know, like, shift some of that loss instead of just canning all those people. It sucks. And unfortunately, it is a thing we're going to continue to see over and over as these companies take on AI and decide that they want to change these things and maybe simplify and reduce their overhead costs. Sucks, but it is what it is. Korkenstein took my bars on one of these. He did mention, so you mentioned the fact that there's 12 games coming out from Microsoft this year. And at this point, we've proceeded to see Sony literally cancel like almost all 12 of their games as a service that were announced. So, you look at where the two companies are at this point in time, and it's a night and day difference. Like, granted, they had the Ghosts State of Play, which looks good. That's great.
Yeah.
That's one game for how many months now? That, like, we're sitting here and it's like Marathon gets delayed. All these things get delayed. And back to your point, Sony doesn't catch any smoke for that whatsoever by the fans. But if Microsoft makes any move, like even if you just have something where it's like, oh, they removed a game type in this game that's coming out, Microsoft's on fire. Xbox is closing down. God forbid. No.
They're leaving the business.
Yeah, they're leaving the business. Oh, there's a portable handheld. It's not an Xbox handheld. You know why it's not an Xbox handheld to these guys out there? Because if it was an Xbox handheld, they'd have to accept the fact that their PlayStation games get to be played on an Xbox system in short of like a year. And that hurts them to the core.
Yep.
That pisses them off. It upsets them. It's the reason we see some of these weak folks out there in Twitter leaving Twitter because they're upset, because all of a sudden Papa Sony isn't covering their asses anymore. They don't have their back. They've betrayed them after all these years, which again, they never had your back in the first place. It's a corporation. Suck it up. Play some games. If you don't like what's going on with it, maybe go get some fresh air. But everything that you mentioned, there can never be a news cycle that Microsoft gets. There's two parts to this. There can never be a news cycle that Microsoft has where they don't immediately kick themselves in the junk the next week with bad news. But also, there can never be any Xbox news where the media, so-called media and journalists, don't proceed to just nitpick it apart and make it seem like Microsoft is the problem. It goes back decades and it continues because it's a bunch of people who either never grew up or just really love that horde mentality. I don't know.
It's a great point, and it's been a really good conversation so far. I think I've been very clear with the points of contention for the conversation at hand. There is a particular person in the chat, which, again, I'm not going to name anybody's name because we don't like to embarrass anybody, but I think they're being I would say I'm being friendly, a tad facetious. I know that there was a question asked about where is the PlayStation tax? Oh, you mean the PlayStation Earth Defense Force that, like Tony Stark's armor, is ready to drop into orbit and cover the Earth with a PlayStation shield the minute anyone gives a criticism.
Tell you what, whoever made that comment, why don't you go ahead, take the time real quick, go onto the internet and find the journalists that always bash on Microsoft. Go on the internet real quick. Find me something bad that they said about the marathon delay. I'll wait. Go ahead.
They're not going to do that. And by the way, Paris Lily in the chat, he said, "Say my name, Boom." It's not you, Paris, that I'm talking about. You know it. Paris is my friend. I wouldn't dare talk about Paris about like that. But he has his opinion. He is a. I put it this way: Paris, who is my very good friend, we do not agree on this, and that is freaking K. He does not believe in the Xbox tax. That is absolutely fine. But please continue, Silent Cypher.
No, I just and someone mentioned, but that's not tax, Cypher. That's just lying. Sure, that's fine. It's got a bunch of different names, right? Like we've seen the Xbox tax called different things over the last year or two. It's console preference. It's lying. Whatever you want to call it, it all lands in the same bucket. We just have to, people have to open their eyes and realize it. And it's cool if someone has a preference on a console. Like if Paris likes one over the other, that's cool. Like we all have friends in the industry. Some of us have ones with a certain company, so we prefer that sometimes.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we can't play games on other things, and it doesn't mean we have to bash the other consoles just because we have friends there or we have a loyalty. It's just not necessary.
No, it's a great point. It's a great point of view. Again, folks, this isn't one of those pile on the rabbit situations. No one is suggesting that PlayStation bad. I mean, I just literally spent the first 25 minutes of this podcast gushing over Ghosts of Yotai. Like, if I'm such a PlayStation hater, would anyone actually do that? No, I'm a gamer. But you got to, again, my pops used to say, you got to call a spade a spade. He like cards. And that is an old school saying, folks. And you know what? It just, again, if I was shooting from the hip and I didn't have examples, Fuzzy Belvedere, I could see you calling me to the carpet and be like, boom, you got, this is gunslinging 101. I don't see any, there are no definitions. There are no explanations, but I explained it. And what I think makes this conversation more pointed, Fuzzy, is that those comments not only are literal freaking headlines from certain journalists on certain websites that we keep the names out of the conversation, literally pulled from the headlines, ladies and gentlemen. But more so than that, and why it's even more pointed, is that is just in the last 6 months, Fuzzy. Let's get your thoughts, man.
Oh, there's so many ways to go with this. I'll start with the whole PlayStation lack of tax. As somebody that was a PlayStation fan up until probably the Xbox One generation, why does nobody talk about that stupid built-in battery on their controllers and how crap it is that they only last 4 hours after about a year? Like, I'm retired. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I can sit there and play games for 8 hours straight on my Elite controller or a rechargeable battery controller from Xbox. But all of my PS4 and PS5 controllers, after a year or so, if I get anything more than 4 hours, I'm lucky. But then they'll say, well, why don't you buy a second controller? Idiots, I'm the only one that's playing on that PlayStation. Why should I buy a second controller to play the games? I don't have to do that with Xbox. I just have rechargeable batteries I can swap out. I mean, sure, I guess I could plug in my wireless controller, but then that would make it a non-wireless controller. It would be a wire controller at that point. But nobody wants to talk about that. They want to talk about the Series S. Series S is a bad console. Okay, guess what? It's more powerful than a Steam Deck. And most games are made to play on a Steam Deck. And now we got something that's even less powerful with the Switch 2, and they're going to make games for that. But the Series S is holding us back. Do you idiots not realize that cross-generation games exist? And there was a thing called, I don't know, the PS4 and the Xbox One that some devs were still making games for, which were lower spec consoles than the Series S. So how is the Series S holding things back? Oh, that's right. It's holding it back for next generation games. Those same next generation games that still appear on the Steam Deck, which is less powerful than the actual Series S. I don't know. I'm not the biggest tech guy, but I at least know that. And when we go to that whole Moore's Law guy, oh my God, like, I don't mean to call people idiots, but I have to if you remember the series console generation, RDNA 2 was what Xbox was going for. Remember the number 2, right? Xbox had to wait for that. Meaning, that means, I don't know, AMD is working on maybe RDNA 2, and anything that comes after the number 2 would be early experimental phase. So why were idiots saying that the PS5 in the beginning of the generation was RDNA 3? I don't know. Last time I checked, 3 comes after 2. So it would be impossible to have RDNA 3 specs in an RDNA 2 console, or in a console that was built and specced out before one that's getting RDNA 2 certification. Math escapes people, I guess. It would be like me saying, hey, the 2026 model year cars are coming out next week, but somehow Sony is making a 2028 car. Like, that would be a little suspect, wouldn't you think? But people want to listen to somebody that obviously can't either do math or understand how technology works. But all of that aside, I always see how people talk about, well, it's not really a tax. And I remember when Destin did that whole thing about, well, prove to me that this isn't a tax. And it's like, even your own partners on IGN, the same guy, Ryan McCafferty, that was all up in arms about Tomb Raider being a timed exclusive on Xbox, but had no smoke for Final Fantasy VII being on PlayStation as a timed exclusive. I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't call it a tax. Maybe we should call it hypocrisy for what it really is, because I think that would go further. I mean, and back to Destin again. He was talking about, like, when he was doing that whole, Xbox tax doesn't exist. The very next day, he was on one of his console podcasts on IGN, and one of the knuckleheads, and I don't pay attention to a lot of the people over there for the fact that when they say
I remember this
stupid,
conversation, but we don't do the names. Please continue, sir.
Yeah, like when they say something stupid like Xbox got no games, or at least that's what I heard. Well, yeah, you're now repeating the stupidness that you're hearing. Like, if Xbox has no games, but they're actually releasing games at the time, I think there were 3 games being released at that point. How can that be no games? Is it no games because you have no interest in them? Or is it no games because you're blind and sensory, inept or something? I don't know. But all of that stuff aside, I just look at it as, when it comes to this whole tax notion, if Xbox is, Game Pass is profitable, great. If it's not profitable, I don't care. As a shareholder, I know if it's not profitable, at some point it's getting cut. But I'm good until 2028. Now, they'll have to figure out, if they cut it shorter, how to resolve, somebody that's stacked up until 2028. By the way, Microsoft points. But anyway, all of that aside, as a gamer, I don't care. As long as I'm getting access to the games the day that they launch and I can enjoy them. And then, hey, if I enjoy it enough and I decide I want to keep that game, because let's say I don't decide to re-up in 2028, I can choose to buy the game. That's an awesome option. I almost wish things like Netflix had that. I know Prime has that to some extent, but a lot of times the stuff that you really would want to see a little bit sooner in a streaming is only for sale. But all of that stuff aside, I don't get why there's so much hate for Game Pass when the stuff involved with Game Pass winds up adding more to the fold of this hobby or this community in general. You would think that would be applauded. I get it. Some devs don't like it, and that's their prerogative. If they choose not to put stuff in Game Pass, great. If they put just stuff in Game Pass, considering all the options they have as a developer, whether you take money up front or you base it off of active users or how many downloads and things along those lines, if you pick the wrong package, that's kind of on you. But I can understand not wanting to do it again and saying your 2 cents on it. But to act like it's destroying gaming in general, when things like live service games are probably a bigger problem. And at the beginning of this generation, broken games were a big problem. Like, I used to get mad, and I always bring up Jedi Survivor. Like, I have the biggest distaste for the gaming media as a whole, primarily because Jedi Survivor, because there were a bunch of 9 and 10s given out to that game because, EA said that they were going to, do a day 1 patch and it would be a fixed game. That's more of a detriment to gaming because it wasn't fixed after the day 1 patch. And it was EA of all places to take their word. Like, I get it. You're a fan of Jedi or Star Wars in general. That's fine. But you're going to take EA's word when they had the abomination of, Battlefield 2042, where it took 3-month patches to even get it to somewhat playable in some instances. And you're going to just take their word that the day 1 patch is going to fix Jedi. Like, I don't know. I know I played it a year later and still Fallen Order played better. Now, granted, there's more to do, or there's more visual stuff, intensive visual stuff in Survivor compared to Fallen Order. But that was unacceptable. And that's another thing. The media is never going to look inward on themselves when they mess up or when they get it wrong or when they target a game because it's not what they wanted it as opposed to what it was meant to be. Look at what was that? Suicide Squad. All right, it's not a Batman game. They told you from get-go it's not a Batman game. It's a looter shooter, live service game, which maybe we don't need more of those, but I don't see people up in arms about other live service games the minute they start. So why not just judge it for what it is? Is it enjoyable to play for you? All right. Did they give you a free copy? Them not giving you a free copy, does that piss you off to the point where you're going to poop on that game every day until you realize, maybe it's an actual good game? Like, that's the nonsense with this whole Xbox tax that I see. And it just doesn't stop with Xbox, but it seems like it never, looks at Sony when it comes to things like Bungie. Sure, you get the reports of, one of the people, inviting people to his house or a girl to his house to look at the cars that he bought with the money that he was supposed to spend to keep, the retention of employees that they let go just before they were vested. that's a whole nother story. But all in all, Bungie is about to probably either be dissolved or absorbed by Sony. Marathon, maybe next year, maybe it never sees the light of day. But I don't see all the news stories about how Bungie may have been the problem child all along when it bounced from Microsoft to Activision to Sony. But nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to talk about how much money was spent on some of these studios that Sony picked up and then wind up eventually closing and canceling their live service game. Like, I don't know, but I'm almost to the point where I'm expecting a Bend Studio closing listing because they did get the green light for Days Gone 2. Right. Their live service game got canceled. So now it looks like I guess they brought on somebody onto the team that's going to be working on another live service game.
Yeah, it's another live service game that they're working on. Yeah.
And if they're having all these troubles with live service games and they seem to be canceled because either they're unprepared to, support the game beyond the release, does Bend Studios wind up being the victim later on? I don't know. But it's funny to me. I can see journalists having friends in studios on either platform. And it almost seems like if it's on Sony, I don't want to talk about it. Hush. This is terrible. And then that's as far as it goes. But when it's Xbox and you have friends there, it's like, oh, this is the end of the world. It must be because of Game Pass. It must be because of this. It must be because it's like we can see the double speak. We could see the two sides of people's faces. And it's ugly. It really is ugly to the point where we call it Xbox tax. You can call it hypocrisy. Call it whatever you want. Just know that it just feels like there's a slight. And as somebody that, like I said, I was more of a Sony fan and I was a never Xbox person back in the day because of Microsoft, because PC gaming, Windows ME sucked and Windows Vista sucked. And I was like, well, if these idiots can't get PC gaming right, why would I even bother with a console from them? But hey, Drive Club happened and it was supposed to be a Forza killer. And, everything changed from there. But all things aside, it's like I'm just tired of the nonsense. I'm tired of, every other week it's something with the Series S. But yet one of the devs that had a problem with the Series S, once they figured out how to use it, it actually helped uplift the operating or optimization on the game for other platforms. Just imagine that. That should tell you all you need to know as far as if things like the Series S is really the problem in gaming, or if Game Pass is really the problem in gaming, considering how much how quick they are to cut stuff. Why wouldn't they cut that? Do you really think that they're in that, acquisition phase still of customers? They got the 35 million range. Okay. If that was enough, then that's enough. If it's not enough, I think they would have pulled the plug by now, but that's just me. I mean, clearly that's what other people would think if, considering that Microsoft laid off 9,000 people, but all in all, you decide. For me, I'll just stick to really playing games, giving my 2 cents on stuff, and then move from there. But I just hate the fact that nobody talks about PlayStation in the way they do about Xbox when there are things that are glaring, like how many hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars was invested in this whole, games as a service initiative. All of it canceled, or a majority of it canceled, and there isn't the single player games popping out of the woodwork because they have to kind of start from scratch, or the ones that were in works, are still a few years out. Looking forward to Ghost of Yotai. Does Intergalactic come out next year, or is it finally, do we see Wolverine? Do we see something Venom? I mean, there aren't enough questions about where they are on their roadmap as far as when we get those things. And if you're satisfied with PlayStation giving you that one, first party title a year, I hear you. That's all well and good. But then don't complain when I guess 3 of our games get canceled on Xbox and we still have 6 other games that are coming out within the next 6 months. Just saying. And I've rambled enough.
No, it was a great rant. And, speaking of rants, no one does it better than Mav, and he's back on the show for the first time. And I can't remember. And listen, obviously when I see a message saying, I think I need to get in on this, that means that we could get a Mav rant. So Mav, what's going on, brother? The Xbox tax, real or like the Yeti, not real?
Good to be back here. Boom. First off, is my mic okay? Because I have kind
It
of a new
sounds
setup,
perfect,
so-
brother. Yeah,
All right,
it sure
awesome,
does.
man. Yeah, dude. This is something I made a post the other day, and it's just been kind of going crazy with replies on this kind of topic. And this is something that goes back at like every single time something seems negative to happen with Xbox in anything in gaming. It seems like let's find a way to either blame one of two things. Find a way to either blame the Xbox Series S, or we can find a way to blame Game Pass, because Game Pass is ruining the industry, and so is Series S. Let's figure it out. Oh my God, Microsoft had layoffs. Well, this must be Game Pass's fault. Let's figure out how to blame Game Pass. Let's write articles. Oh my God, Game Pass is no longer sustainable again. I thought we've been through this like 10 damn times already this generation. And all of a sudden, it has to come up again. Game Pass is not sustainable. Game Pass is not profitable. Oops, I made a mistake. Let me clarify. It actually is now. But oh my God, the damage is done because we've had people talking about this nonstop for 3 days, blaming Game Pass for Microsoft's huge 9,000 layoff, which really ultimately is a corporate thing in general. It's a tech giant thing. It's also an industry thing in general. When you look at it across the entire gaming industry, about multiple companies doing layoffs across the board. What were people asking when PlayStation had all of their layoffs sequentially throughout the last year? Were they saying, oh my God, this must be PS Plus's fault? Or were they saying, oh, this must be a AAA gaming pipeline fault? Or this must be their switch to games and services fault? What are they saying? Why are the questions not being asked? Why are the questions not being asked about every other freaking publisher that they're having all of these massive layoffs? Are they blaming their gaming subscription services? Are they blaming any of those other stuff? No, they're just saying, oh, it's an industry problem. So why all of a sudden, when Microsoft has the same damn thing, do we go back to Game Pass again? It's such a backwards way of thinking that consumers have with Xbox and this whole Game Pass scenario. We should be asking every company to be giving us the same value that Game Pass is giving us. Why are we not saying, PlayStation, where's your games in PlayStation Plus Extra? Right? Why aren't you putting your games in there day and date? What could you imagine if we had the same fear with movie subscription services? Oh my God, Netflix, you're making too many movies and content in there day one for your content. Yeah, I think you need to slow down because you might be going out of business. Oh my God, what about Amazon? Hey, you need to stop making movies. You need to stop making shows. I'm worried about the sustainability of the product that I'm subscribing to. What an idiotic thing for consumers to be concerned about. Are we playing the content? Are we actually investing in the content? Are we paying for a service that we want value in? Or are we sit there worried about the profits of a tech giant that's going to be a $3 to $5 trillion corporation? What are we doing? Why are people so concerned and caught up with how much money and profit and sustainability that Microsoft has when they're doing extremely well? Oh, these same people that are complaining about that and worried about that, are they ignoring the fact that, hey, guess what? 4 of the top 5 games last month were sitting there on the top purchased games on your platform? Seems like they're doing pretty good to me.
Yeah.
It's always been an option. It always will be an option. It is something that is completely a thing where they're making plenty of revenue, plenty of profit within the organization. And for some reason, people always find a way to attack it. Some devs don't like it. That's cool. Some devs don't want to put their games in there. Some devs do like it. But all of a sudden, if one dev says they don't want to put their game in there or they don't like it, it's a huge, massive story. Oh my God, this developer said that they don't want to put their game in Game Pass. And it's, oh, can we talk about the elephant in the room, Game Pass? Oh, come on, dude. What about all the other developers that have been doing really great with Game Pass? What about Clair Obscure Expedition 33? It could be Game of the Year this year. How much marketing and how much extra spotlight did they get on that game because it was in Game Pass? What about Oblivion? Didn't seem to hurt that very much either, did it? So stop picking and choosing when there's one game that didn't sell or do very well, or if there's layoffs or one studio closure or whatever, to think about, oh, the biggest problem in the world must be gaming subscription services are ruining everything. Give me more. PlayStation, put your games in PS Plus. I know you probably won't, but you could. Anybody that says they can't is wrong. They can if they wanted to. All these other companies give us more value for our dollar. That's what us as consumers should be asking for, not concerned with their profits. Anyway, that's all I got to say.
A phenomenal Mav rant following incredible conversation, an honest and earnest conversation from Korkenstein, Silent Cypher, Fuzzy Belvedere, and now yourself. I think that to open up the conversation, I was very pointed. I specifically set up bullet points that explained where this conversation was going to go. And again, there are some people that disagree, and that's fine. You don't have to agree with it. Some people in here are hell-bent on trying to prove us wrong. Well, when the majority of people here can see what is going on, it's hard to argue, right? There is no PlayStation tax. When people talk about Marathon, it's because Bungie literally stole artwork. Literally, thievery was committed. And it was done, and it was put into the game as if it was theirs. And when you talk about that, because this, a couple of people brought up it as a point of contention. What, we're not supposed to? That's tax? No, that's an actual crime. They literally, it's copyright infringement. They committed forgery. I almost say borrowed. They stole someone's artwork, and they put it into their game as if it was theirs, right? The fact that they've had 10 of the 12 gas games that Jim Ryan, before he was fired, said that they were going to do have been canceled. That's not smoke. That's not something to be had. That's us piling on the rack. No, that's facts. The fact that they don't have a roadmap. As a PlayStation fan, you shouldn't be defending that. You should be asking what the H is going on at PlayStation Studios, ladies and gentlemen. Why don't I know what the next game from my favorite studio is coming out? That's not smoke to be just for smoke. That is legitimate questions. And everything that has been asked against Xbox in those 5 bullet points were legit. Again, why it's a unique conversation is those are literal headlines that people have put into print to run a story, to force a narrative. And that's just happened this year. That is ultimately that is the glaring why there is an Xbox tax.
Yeah, boom. Like I'd say, I don't want to interrupt you, but like
No,
the same
please,
thing,
go
like with this is like the same thing that bothers me is like Xbox has had so many freaking games hit day one this year that like the pipeline's just been absolutely insane.
Yes.
Right. It's been absolutely insane. We just got another one. Tony Hawk just dropped. Great game. Like it just continues. I think Grounded 2 is coming soon as well. And then guess what? We got Wu-Chang Fallen Feathers around the corner. Then you also have another Call of Duty's hidden this year. You have Outer Worlds 2. Like this year's just been chock full of awesome games and Game Pass. And instead of the conversation and the media and all these other people of saying, hey, everybody, this is crazy. All these freaking games are dropping into Game Pass day and date. How amazing is that? There's all these great games. You should sign up for this. They're saying, oh, this is like the reason why Microsoft had this whole tech layoff thing that also affected Xbox. It's just so weird and backwards. Why is the backwards thinking only with Xbox? And why is that always a thing when if you look at what they're delivering compared to any other publisher, any other platform, it is hands down by far the most good content delivered at the best price. We should be singing the praises of that. not trying to tell them that you can't give us this much stuff. Like, why? Like, hey, it's too good. Stop it. You need to be more like PlayStation so that way you can be safe. Stop. I don't want any more games. No more. Stop the development and everything. Please. Just hey, $80, $90. Just sell everything to me as much as you can to make sure that it's sustainable for you. Hey, please just do freaking just get your heads on straight, people. Sing the praises of the company that's giving you the most at the best value in any kind of media. That's what we should be asking for. We're customers. We're gamers. Unless you're a shareholder and you're like Fuzzy, well, she's not too concerned because Microsoft's profits seem to be doing pretty dang good anyway. Unless you're something like that, like, why are you even talking about this stuff? Just saying.